Okay, we've just mounted a tri-rail on here, and though it won't matter, I don't particularly like this bolt style. It just don't feel quite right. So, I'm sure most of you know how to do this, and if you don't, here's what you do. You take your bolt, slide it back, pull the trigger all the way back, and the bolt will just slide right out. The trigger mechanisms on these are insanely simple. It's ridiculous, and it's one of the reasons a Mosin will work till Judgment Day. Even if you don't take care of it, it'll work till Judgment Day. Okay, here we go. First we got to disassemble the bolt. So, I'm going to take the bolt, take the rear, or the back, pull it backwards a little bit, twist it, slide it down. That's a deprimed bolt. You can see the pin is now protruding from that point. And this whole assembly here will just slip right up. That's actually two separate assemblies. It is the claw extractor, primary face, and an additional alignment piece here. That simply slips on. It has a small track with a pin. Not complicated at all. Okay. Some of the people you can purchase a Mosin from will not include this little bag of doohickeys that you get with it. And it has a bore, I don't know, I guess for clearing a block mostly, a little T-handle for the cleaning rod you get with it. It's nothing really all that complicated. This, I gotta be honest, I've never seen anyone have any explanation for what this is. The one you really care about, though, is this guy. This is a pin protrusion tool. Or, it's also kind of a flathead screwdriver. You can completely disassemble this weapon with only this tool and put it back together again in such a fashion that it's properly calibrated and won't give you an over-puncture, or give you a punctured primer or a weak strike. Anyway, obviously you don't want to damage the strike face of the pin. So, this nice leather bag they have works pretty well for me. So you can take the bolt, and if you hold it down with enough force, which they have a pretty hefty spring in there, you can take this back and just spin it right off. Okay. And this completely disassembles. This is the primary bolt piece. I would keep it, especially if it's stamped. This one is electropenciled, so it's not worth that much. Obviously you have your pin, your spring, and the very back there. And this is actually screwed into that. It's a pretty unique design as far as I know, as for a bolt action rifle. Okay. As a gun show, I also picked this up, which is a bent bolt, and it feels a lot more natural of an action to cycle it with this than it does with the straight bolt, especially one in as rough a shape as that is. You take the pin, threads go back in here. Gotta hold it down, sort of set this in here gently, make sure you're not cross-threading that. Okay. Now we get to the fun part, pin protrusion. Now, there's a little alignment mark back here. You can see stamped into that, and then the center of that, the pin, is supposed to look something closer to that whenever it's lined up. And that's because the center of this is a rounded edged rectangle, I guess, would be a good way to describe it. And so is the pin. So you can't put this in at a weird angle. Anyway, I know this rifle fairly well, so I'm going to guess the pin needs to be sitting about there. That's just eyeballing it. But I've had this bolt apart easily a dozen times since I bought the rifle. Okay. Set this back in here. This pin here needs to line up with that groove in the bolt. And you have it all set together there. Now there are two marks on the protrusion tool. This one is better marked than most of them. There is a 7.5 and a 9.5. You don't want it to hit the 9.5. So you take the tool and you rub it over. And since this is not touching the 9.5, that's good. Then you take it and you put it on the 7.5, and you don't want to be able to slip it past that. You want it to be contacting the 7.5. So it's a range that you have to be in to get an acceptable primer strike. This is within that acceptable range. So, put it back in the rifle, pull the back of the bolt, pop it up. I like to pull the trigger so it doesn't rub on the bolt as much, and just slide it right back in. No big deal. And since that only took a little more than 5.5 minutes, here's an extra bonus for those of you who don't know. The Mosin actually has a built-in safety, and I've tried this with an IVS check and it didn't work, but I've seen several others that it does. So once the bolt is primed like it is here, you take the bolt, you pull it backwards, it takes a fair bit of force, and you twist it counterclockwise, or to your left, and it will lock onto the back of the receiver here. So as much as you want to pull that trigger, the pin is locked mechanically backwards and it cannot fire. Now, it doesn't take a huge amount of force to... Well, actually it does take quite a bit of force, realizing it now. This rifle is about as safe as it's ever going to get. In addition to a fairly hefty trigger pull, as Mosins have, and this one isn't a horrible trigger break, I gotta say. Some of them will be wretched, this one isn't one of them. Anyway, that's how to change a bolt handle and to properly calibrate your pin protrusion on a Mosin Nagant.